The metal screamed as those bolt cutters sliced through my dock chains. 2:30 in the morning, and there they were, twin blondes in matching workout gear, dismantling my life one cable at a time. The lake water lapped against the wooden posts like it was trying to warn me, but I was already too late. "Excuse me," I called out, my bare feet hitting the cold dock planks. "What the hell are you doing?" The taller one, Victoria, I'd learn later, turned around with this smile that could freeze hell over. "Emergency environmental action. This structure violates county water protection codes." Her sister Veronica nodded, holding up some official-looking papers. "Clearwater Lake Protection Initiative. You're looking at serious fines, lady." I'm Elena Vasquez, by the way. Spent 15 years testing water quality for half the state. And if you're watching Karenology, you know things are never as simple as they seem. These two had no business on my property at this hour, but they acted like they owned the whole lake. Environmental action? I laughed, but nothing was funny about watching my grandfather's dock, the one he built with his own hands before the factory poisoned his fishing business, getting torn apart by strangers. You want to see environmental damage? Let me show you my pH readings from last month. Victoria's smile widened. She was enjoying this. "Save it for the hearing, sweetheart. This eyesore comes down tonight." The old pH meter felt heavy in my bathrobe pocket, the same digital tester Grandpa had saved up for, back when he still believed government inspectors cared about truth over politics. 20 years later, and I was still fighting the same battles he'd lost. "You have 30 seconds to get off my property," I said, pulling out my phone. "Then I call the sheriff." "Go ahead," Veronica chirped. She was the quiet type, but her eyes had that same predatory gleam. "Sheriff Martinez is expecting your call. Amazing how quickly emergency permits get processed when public safety's at stake." My stomach dropped. They'd planned this. The permits, the timing, even the sheriff, all coordinated. But why my dock? It was barely 20 feet long, hardly the environmental catastrophe they were making it out to be. Public safety? I stepped closer, ignoring the way the dock swayed under our combined weight. "This dock has been here 40 years. Never hurt anybody." 40 years of illegal dumping, Victoria said, waving her papers again. "Chemical runoff from your property's been contaminating the lake ecosystem. We have soil samples." That's when I knew something was wrong. My property sat uphill from the lake, and I'd tested every inch of shoreline myself. The only contamination in Clearwater Lake came from the industrial complex 2 miles south, the same complex that had destroyed Grandpa's livelihood decades ago. "Show me these soil samples," I demanded. Victoria's sister stepped between us. "All evidence will be presented at your administrative hearing, Thursday, 10 a.m., County Courthouse. Don't be late." The bolt cutters bit through another chain. Each snap felt like losing another piece of my family's history. But something else bothered me more than the vandalism, the way these two worked, too smooth, too practiced, like they'd done this before. "How many other docks you two torn down this month?" I asked. For just a second, Victoria's mask slipped. "That's confidential information." "Is it?" I pulled up the county permit database on my phone. Amazing what you can access at 2:30 a.m. when you know the right passwords. Because it looks like Clearwater Holdings LLC has requested emergency environmental reviews on 12 different lakefront properties in the last 6 months. Both sisters went quiet. The only sound was water slapping against the dock posts and distant traffic on the highway. 12 properties, I continued, scrolling through permits, all owned by families who've been here for generations, all facing sudden environmental violations, all forced to sell to, well, what do you know, Clearwater Holdings. Victoria grabbed her sister's arm. "We're done here. Dock comes down by sunrise, or Sheriff Martinez handles it." They walked away like they owned the place, leaving me standing on what was left of my dock, holding my grandfather's pH meter, and finally understanding the game they were playing. This wasn't about environmental protection. This was about money, old-fashioned land grabbing, dressed up in eco-friendly wrapping paper. But they'd picked the wrong water expert to mess with. Have you ever felt that moment when everything clicks into place? When you realize the fight isn't really about what you thought it was about? Standing there in the moonlight, watching their taillights disappear up the hill, I felt something shift inside me. They wanted a war over water quality. They'd get one. Just not the war they were expecting. Thursday morning, courthouse coffee tastes like defeat mixed with bleach. I sat in those plastic chairs designed to make you surrender before the hearing even starts, watching Victoria and Veronica work the room like they owned it. They'd upgraded their matching outfits, power suits now, hair pulled back in identical buns, professional vultures, the kind that smile while they pick your bones clean. Elena Vasquez, the clerk's voice cut through my thoughts. Administrative hearing, courtroom B. The hearing room smelled like old carpet and broken dreams. Judge Patricia Henley presided, a woman I'd met at community water safety meetings, someone I'd considered reasonable. Today she looked tired, distracted, like she'd rather be anywhere else. This emergency environmental action concerns property at 847 Lakeshore Drive, she began, reading from papers Victoria had handed her. Allegations of groundwater contamination and illegal discharge into Clearwater Lake. I stood up. Your Honor, I've been testing that water for months. There's no contamination from my property. Victoria rose smoothly. We have soil analysis showing dangerous pH levels and chemical markers consistent with residential runoff. The dock structure itself channels contaminated water directly into the lake ecosystem. She handed the judge a manila folder, thick with official-looking documents, graphs, charts, laboratory letterheads, the whole show. But something nagged at me about those papers. Too clean, too perfect. Ms. Vasquez, Judge Henley said, do you have environmental testing to counter these findings? I pulled out my own folder, thinner but real. 6 months of water quality readings, Your Honor, all within normal parameters. The contamination they're claiming doesn't exist. Your testing equipment, Veronica spoke for the first time, is it certified for legal proceedings? My grandfather's pH meter suddenly felt heavy in my hand. 20 years old, reliable as sunrise, but not exactly courtroom ready by modern standards. It's accurate, I said, knowing how weak that sounded. Judge Henley looked between the sisters' professional presentation and my homemade data. I'm ordering an independent environmental assessment. Meanwhile, the dock remains closed to public use pending final determination. Victoria's smile could have powered the courthouse. Thank you, Your Honor. In the interest of public safety, we recommend immediate removal of the structure. That's not what the order says, I protested. But Judge Henley was already moving to the next case. 30 days for independent testing. Court dismissed. Outside, Victoria cornered me by the courthouse steps. Up close, she smelled like expensive perfume and predatory confidence. Nothing personal, Elena. Sometimes progress requires sacrifice. Progress? I laughed. You mean profit. Smart woman. Pity you're on the wrong side of this. She adjusted her suit jacket, revealing a small pin on her lapel, some kind of corporate logo I didn't recognize. My client's prepared to offer you fair market value for your property. Generous, considering the environmental liabilities. What client? Her smile went razor sharp. Let's just say they have big plans for Clearwater Lake, plans that don't include family docks and small-time water testing. She walked away, leaving me standing there with a sinking feeling that this was bigger than two sisters playing environmental activists. This was organized, funded, and they'd done their homework. But they'd made one mistake. They'd assumed I'd roll over like the other 11 families. That afternoon, I drove to Lakeside Tavern, the kind of place where locals actually talk to each other instead of staring at phones. Marcus Bear Thompson ran it, a mountain of a man who'd lived on Clearwater Lake longer than anybody. Elena, he waved me over to the bar. Heard about your dock situation? Damn shame. Bear, those sisters who were causing trouble, you know anything about them? He glanced around, then leaned closer. Victoria and Veronica Steinberg. Moved here 8 months ago, rented that big house on Elm Street. Real chatty about environmental protection, real quiet about where their money comes from. What kind of money? The kind that buys permits overnight and has sheriff's deputies on speed dial. He poured me a coffee without asking. Elena, 12 families in 8 months, all lakefront properties, all sold to the same shell company after mysterious environmental problems. My hands tightened around the coffee mug. Clearwater Holdings. You're smarter than they gave you credit for. Bear wiped down glasses with practiced efficiency. Question is, what you gonna do about it? I stared out the tavern window at the lake. My lake, Grandpa's lake, our lake. The water looked peaceful in the afternoon sun, but underneath, something toxic was growing. Not chemicals this time, something worse. Greed. I'm going to test their water, I said finally. Bear raised an eyebrow. Come again? They claim my dock is contaminating the lake, but what if the contamination is coming from somewhere else? Somewhere they don't want anyone looking? For the first time all day, I felt like I could breathe again. The sisters had made their move, played their cards perfectly, but they'd forgotten one thing about water experts. We don't just test what people want us to test. We test everything. And Clearwater Lake was about to get the most thorough environmental examination of its life. The water testing gear weighed 40 pounds, but I'd carried heavier loads through worse terrain. 3 a.m. on Clearwater Lake, with fog rolling off the surface like nature's own smokescreen. Perfect conditions for the kind of work that gets environmental consultants sued. I launched my small aluminum boat from the public access ramp, engine purring quiet enough not to wake the million-dollar lakefront houses. My destination wasn't my own dock. That was sealed off with county tape like a crime scene. I was heading 2 miles south, where the real story lived. Clearwater Holdings' industrial complex squatted on the shore like a concrete tumor. Officially, it was a water treatment and environmental remediation facility. Unofficially, based on the permits I dug up at the county office, they were processing runoff from 3 different manufacturing plants. The closer I got, the more the water changed color. Not dramatically, you'd miss it unless you knew what to look for. But my grandfather's pH meter didn't lie. The readings dropped from 7.2 near the public ramp to 6.8 as I approached the facility's outflow pipes. Then I hit the jackpot. Hidden behind a screen of cattails, barely visible from shore, a 6-inch discharge pipe pumped a steady stream of yellowish water directly into the lake. No permits posted, no environmental monitoring equipment, just raw industrial discharge flowing 24/7 into the same ecosystem the Steinberg sisters claimed to protect. I collected samples in sterile containers, noting GPS coordinates and timestamps. The smell alone told me everything. Metallic, sharp, like pennies left in acid. Whatever they were dumping, it wasn't water treatment byproduct. My phone buzzed. Text message from unknown number. You're trespassing on private property. Leave now. I looked around. No signs, no fences, just open water. But someone was watching. Probably cameras mounted on those industrial buildings. Maybe motion sensors I'd missed in the dark. Instead of leaving, I moved closer to the pipe. If they wanted to play surveillance games, they'd get a show worth watching. The water sample at the discharge point made my stomach turn. pH 4.1, acidic enough to kill fish, corrode metal, and sure as hell contaminate everything downstream, including my grandfather's dock. But here's the beautiful part. Contamination flows downstream, not up. My property sat north of this facility. Basic hydrology meant their discharge was poisoning the southern end of the lake, not the northern shoreline where my dock stood. The Steinberg sisters' entire case was built on fake science. My phone rang. Marcus Barry Thompson, calling at 3:30 in the morning. Elena, you need to get off that lake, now. What's wrong? The sheriff's department just got a call about suspicious activity near the water treatment plant. They're sending patrol boats. I could already see lights moving across the water. Flashlights, maybe spotlights, coming my way fast. How did you... A scanner radio. Elena, these people have connections. Real connections. You get caught out there with unauthorized water samples. They'll charge you with trespassing, theft, maybe environmental terrorism if they're feeling creative. I started the boat engine, but kept collecting samples. 2 more containers, GPS coordinates locked in. If I was going down, I'd go down with evidence. The patrol boat's spotlight hit me as I cleared the cattails. This is Sheriff's Department. Cut your engine and prepare to be boarded. I raised my hands, pH meter still clutched in one fist. I'm conducting environmental testing. This is public water. The deputy looked young enough to be my nephew, but his hand stayed near his weapon. Ma'am, we received reports of unauthorized research activity in a restricted zone. Restricted zone? I gestured at the open lake. Show me the signs. He couldn't, because there weren't any. But his radio crackled with instructions I couldn't quite hear. Ma'am, I need you to follow us back to shore. You're not under arrest, but we need to verify your credentials and the nature of your activities. By sunrise, I was sitting in the sheriff's station, watching Deputy Martinez, a decent man caught in an impossible situation, try to figure out what laws I might have broken. Elena, I've known your family 20 years, but I've got pressure from county commissioners, environmental groups, and people with more influence than common sense. He leaned back in his chair. What were you really doing out there? I set the water samples on his desk, finding out who's actually contaminating Clearwater Lake. And it's not my dock. Deputy Martinez stared at the containers like they might explode. Elena, if you've got evidence of environmental violations, there are proper channels. The proper channels are owned by the same people dumping industrial waste into our lake. He rubbed his forehead. You're putting me in a hell of a position. They're putting everyone in a hell of a position, Martinez. 12 families forced to sell, a lake ecosystem getting poisoned, and 2 sisters making bank on environmental fraud. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message made my blood freeze. Drop the investigation or lose more than your dock. I showed Martinez the text. His expression went from tired to dangerous. That sounds like a threat. It is a threat. Question is, what are you going to do about it? For a long moment, we stared at each other across 20 years of shared community history. Then, he picked up one of my water samples. Elena, I can't officially endorse unauthorized environmental testing. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But I also can't ignore evidence of potential criminal activity, even if that evidence was obtained through unconventional means. I felt hope flicker back to life. What are you saying? I'm saying you might want to get those samples to someone with proper laboratory credentials, someone whose test results would hold up in court. He stood up, walked to the window, and spoke without looking at me. And Elena, next time you go water testing at 3 a.m., maybe let someone know where you're going. I was halfway to the door when he called out one more time. Elena, those people threatening you, they just made this personal. The morning sun felt different as I walked to my truck. Warmer, maybe. Or maybe it was just the knowledge that I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. But I also knew the Steinberg sisters wouldn't back down. They'd escalate. The question was, how far were they willing to go? Dr. Kim Patel's laboratory looked like something from a crime show. White walls, sterile equipment, and the kind of precision that made my grandfather's old pH meter seem like a toy from a cereal box. But Kim herself was pure scientist, practical, curious, and pissed off about environmental fraud. These readings are insane, she said, adjusting her glasses as she studied my water samples. Elena, this isn't just contamination. This is deliberate poisoning. I leaned against the lab bench, trying not to touch anything expensive. How deliberate? The chemical signature suggests industrial metals processing, chromium, lead compounds, sulfuric acid derivatives. She pointed to numbers on her computer screen that looked like a death sentence. Whatever facility is producing this discharge, they're skipping about 15 steps of mandatory treatment. Can you prove it in court? With pleasure. Kim's smile had sharp edges. I've been waiting 5 years for a case this clear-cut. Environmental criminals usually cover their tracks better. That should have been good news. But something nagged at me about how easy this felt. The Steinberg sisters had run this scam on 11 other families. They weren't amateurs. So why leave such obvious evidence? My phone rang. Victoria's name on the caller ID made my stomach clench. Elena, such a lovely morning for boat rides. What do you want? Coffee, neutral ground, lakeside tavern, say noon. Her voice carried that same predatory sweetness. I think we have things to discuss. I checked my watch, 11:15. Fine, but if this is another intimidation attempt. Just coffee, darling, between neighbors. The line went dead. Kim looked up from her computer. Bad idea, Elena. These people have already threatened you once. Public place, broad daylight. Besides, I want to hear what she's offering. She's not offering anything. She's buying time. But I was already heading for the door, Kim's test results tucked safely in my jacket pocket. For the first time in days, I held solid evidence that could shut down the sisters' operation permanently. I should have listened to Kim. Lakeside Tavern at noon buzzed with the usual crowd, retirees, off-duty construction workers, and locals who treated Bear's Coffee like a religious experience. Victoria sat alone in a corner booth, looking perfectly composed in designer jeans and a sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Elena, She waved like we were old friends. So glad you could make it. I slid into the booth across from her, keeping my jacket zipped. Cut the act, Victoria. What's this about? Straight to business. I respect that. She sipped her coffee with theatrical elegance. My clients are prepared to triple their offer for your property. Cash, 30-day closing, all legal fees covered. Your clients? People with vision, Elena. People who see Clearwater Lake's true potential. As a toxic waste dump? Her laugh sounded like breaking glass. Such imagination. No wonder you're having trouble with reality. She pulled out a tablet, swiped to an architectural rendering. Luxury condos, marina, golf course, the full gentrification package. Clearwater Resort and Spa, she said proudly. $500 million in development investment. 2,000 permanent jobs. The kind of project that transforms communities. Built on stolen land with poisoned water. Built on properly acquired real estate with full environmental remediation. Victoria's mask slipped for just a second, revealing something cold underneath. Elena, you're fighting a war you can't win. My clients have resources you can't imagine. Like the sheriff's department? Like everyone who matters in this county. She leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. You think Deputy Martinez is your friend? Check his mortgage payments, his daughter's college tuition, his wife's medical bills. My blood went cold. Martinez had seemed genuinely concerned about the threats, genuinely interested in justice, but people with money could buy anything. Even honest cops had pressure points. You're bluffing. Am I? Victoria slid a manila folder across the table. Bank records, Elena. Martinez owes more money than he'll make in 10 years of sheriff's deputy pay. Guess who's been helping him out? I opened the folder with trembling hands. Loan documents, payment schedules, financial statements, all showing Deputy Martinez deep in debt to something called Clearwater Development Trust. Coincidence? Victoria smiled. I think not. My phone buzzed. Text from Martinez. Elena, need to see you at the station. Important update on your case. Victoria's smile widened. Better hurry. Don't want to keep your friend waiting. I stood up so fast I knocked over my coffee cup. This isn't over. Oh, it is. You just don't realize it yet. Outside the tavern, my hands shook as I dialed Kim's number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. A sick feeling settled in my stomach as I drove toward Kim's lab. The closer I got, the worse it felt. By the time I saw the fire trucks, I already knew. Kim's laboratory was a smoking ruin, windows blown out, equipment destroyed, years of research turned to ash and melted plastic. The fire chief, a man I'd known since high school, looked like he'd aged 10 years in one morning. Elena, Jesus, thank God you weren't inside. What happened? Gas leak, they think. Explosion around 11:30. Kim's in the hospital with burns and smoke inhalation. 11:30, right when Victoria had been buying me coffee, establishing her alibi. Will she be okay? Touch and go, Elena. He lowered his voice. The lab that burned, that was just the front building. Kim's real research was in the basement archive. That's completely gone. Including my water samples, including the test results that could have ended this nightmare. I drove home in a daze, Victoria's words echoing in my head. People with resources you can't imagine. Everyone who matters in this county. My house felt different when I walked inside. Nothing obviously disturbed, but small things were wrong. Kitchen drawer slightly open, bookshelf rearranged, computer still warm, though I'd turned it off before leaving. They'd been inside, searching, cataloging, probably planting surveillance equipment. I was alone, broke, and fighting people who could buy cops, burn laboratories, and make evidence disappear like magic tricks. But they'd made one mistake. They'd gotten cocky, and cocky people leave trails. I opened my laptop and started typing. If they wanted to monitor my computer activity, I'd give them something worth watching. Time to find out just how deep Clearwater Development Trust's pockets really went. And who was really pulling the strings. 3 days of digging through public records had turned my dining room into a conspiracy theorist's dream. Papers scattered everywhere, red string connecting dots that didn't want to be connected, and enough coffee cups to caffeinate a small army. But the picture emerging from all that chaos was uglier than I'd imagined. Clearwater Development Trust wasn't just buying lakefront properties. They owned the county water treatment contracts, 3 construction companies, and had silent partnerships with half the local government, including Judge Patricia Henley's husband's law firm, the same judge who'd ruled against my doc. My laptop chimed with an encrypted message from someone calling themselves Deep Current, cute code name for what turned out to be the most important contact of my life. Meet me at the old grain elevator, midnight, come alone. I have what you need. Every instinct screamed trap, but every rational thought screamed that I was running out of options fast. Kim remained unconscious in the ICU. Martinez hadn't returned my calls. Even Bear at the tavern had started acting nervous when I walked in. The grain elevator sat abandoned on the North Shore, a concrete monument to better times when this county grew food instead of corruption. I parked a quarter-mile away and walked, my grandfather's pH meter weighing heavy in my jacket pocket like a talisman against whatever was waiting. Elena. The voice came from inside the elevator's shadow. A woman stepped out, middle-aged, business casual, with the kind of tired eyes that came from seeing too much truth. Who are you? Someone who used to work for Clearwater Development Trust. Someone who got sick of covering up their crimes. She handed me a waterproof case. Everything you need to destroy them. Financial records, environmental impact, reports they buried, communication logs showing exactly who they've bought and how much it cost. I opened the case. USB drives, printed documents, photographs of illegal waste dumps, a treasure trove of evidence. Why now? Why me? Because Kim Patel was my friend. Because 12 families lost their homes to fraud. Because that lake was my daughter's favorite swimming spot before they poisoned it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Elena, they know about this meeting. They'll come for you tonight. You have maybe 6 hours to get that evidence to someone who can't be bought. Who? Everyone's compromised. Not everyone. There's a federal EPA investigator named Sarah Chen. She's been watching Clearwater Trust for 2 years, waiting for solid evidence. My phone buzzed. Text message. We know where you are. Last chance to take the money and walk away. They're here, the woman whispered. Back entrance. Go now. I ran like my life depended on it, because it probably did. The case bounced against my leg as I sprinted through tall grass toward my truck. Behind me, flashlight beams swept the area around the grain elevator. My engine turned over on the 3rd try. Headlights appeared in my rearview mirror as I hit the main road, following close enough to let me know they were there. The chase lasted 20 minutes through back roads I'd known since childhood. They wanted to scare me, not catch me, at least not yet. When I finally lost them in the maze of county roads near Miller's farm, my hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the steering wheel. I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to the 24-hour truck stop on Highway 9 and called EPA investigator Sarah Chen from a payphone like some kind of Cold War spy. Ms. Vasquez, I've been hoping you'd call. You know who I am? I know Clearwater Trust has been running environmental fraud schemes across 3 counties. I know they've corrupted local officials and intimidated anyone who tries to stop them. And I know you just risked your life to get evidence that could shut them down permanently. How could you know that? Because I've been tracking their communications. They're panicking, Elena, which means you found something that scares them. I look down at the case in my hands. What happens now? Now you get somewhere safe while I coordinate with federal prosecutors. This is officially a federal investigation as of tonight. What about the Steinberg sisters? What about them? Elena, Victoria, and Veronica Steinberg are small-time grifters. The real power behind Clearwater Trust is someone much more dangerous. My blood chilled. Who? County Commissioner Robert Hayes. He's been using environmental regulations as a weapon to force property sales, then developing the land through shell companies. The sisters are just his front women. Commissioner Hayes, the man who'd given speeches about protecting Clearwater Lake's natural beauty, the man who'd promised voters he'd never let developers destroy their community. Hayes has been planning this for 5 years, Sarah continued. The resort development, the industrial permits, even the fake environmental crises. Your dock was just the last piece of lakefront property he needed. I thought about all those families forced to sell, all those destroyed lives, all for one man's greed disguised as environmental protection. Can you stop him? With your evidence, I can bury him so deep he'll need archaeology to find daylight. But as I hung up the phone, I realized the real fight was just beginning. Hayes had money, connections, and 5 years of careful planning. He wouldn't go down without destroying everyone who threatened him, including me. My phone rang. Victoria's number. "Elena, sweetie, you've been very busy tonight." "Go to hell." Such language. "Elena, darling, you should know that accidents happen to people who don't mind their own business. Lab fires, car crashes, unfortunate drowning incidents at popular swimming spots." The line went dead. I sat in my truck outside that truck stop, holding evidence that could save my community and wondering if I'd live long enough to use it. Because somewhere in the darkness, Commissioner Hayes was making phone calls, and people who crossed Commissioner Hayes had a habit of disappearing. But you know what? Sometimes fighting the good fight means risking everything. Even your life. Dawn broke gray and cold over Clearwater Lake, and I was already suited up in my diving gear when Bear found me at the marina. The man moved quietly for someone his size, but 40 years of early morning fishing had taught him when to whisper. "Elena, what the hell are you doing?" Getting proof they can't burn, buy, or disappear. I adjusted my dive mask, checking the waterproof camera clipped to my weight belt. That discharge pipe I found 3 nights ago? I'm going back down to document everything. That's suicide. Hayes has people watching the water. Then they'll get a show. Bear grabbed my arm. "Elena, listen to me. Kim Patel died 20 minutes ago. Complications from smoke inhalation, they're saying." The world tilted sideways. Kim, who'd been so excited to nail environmental criminals. Kim, who'd smiled when she talked about justice. Gone because she'd helped me find the truth. I'm going down there, Bear, for Kim, for my grandfather, for everyone Hayes destroyed. Then I'm coming with you. I started to argue, but the look in his eyes stopped me cold. Bear had lost friends to Hayes' schemes too. His brother-in-law's farm, foreclosed after mysterious environmental violations. His nephew's construction company, bankrupted after permit delays and regulatory harassment. We took Bear's boat out before the morning mist cleared, heading for the industrial complex while Hayes' watchers were still drinking their first cups of coffee. The water looked peaceful in the early light, but I knew what poison lurked beneath the surface. The dive went smooth until it didn't. 20 feet down, following the discharge pipe toward its source, my camera caught something that made my blood freeze. Not just one pipe, 6 of them, running from different parts of the industrial complex into the deepest part of the lake, a whole network of illegal dumping that had been poisoning Clearwater for years. I was documenting the largest pipe when the underwater current changed. Not natural current, boat propellers churning the water above me. Someone had found us. Bear's voice crackled through my dive radio. "Elena, get up here now. Sheriff's boat's incoming fast." I kicked toward the surface, but something snagged my air hose. Not equipment malfunction, deliberate sabotage. Someone had cut my line. 40 seconds of air left in my lungs, 60 feet to the surface, and somewhere above, people who wanted me dead. I ditched my weight belt and shot upward, lungs burning, vision starting to tunnel. The camera felt heavy in my hand, but I held onto it like my life depended on it, because it did. I broke the surface gasping, 30 yards from Bear's boat. Sheriff's deputies surrounded him, weapons drawn, voices sharp with authority, bought and paid for by Commissioner Hayes. "Elena Vasquez, you're under arrest for trespassing, vandalism, and interfering with industrial operations." Deputy Martinez wasn't among them. Good. I hoped that meant Victoria had been lying about owning him. These were Hayes' bought and paid for badge carriers, the kind who asked how high when rich men said jump. But as they hauled me onto their boat, I managed to slip the waterproof camera to Bear. He palmed it smooth as a card shark, and none of Hayes' goons noticed. The county jail smelled like disinfectant and despair. They put me in a holding cell with a drunk driver and a woman who'd bounced one too many checks, waiting for whatever charges Hayes' lawyers could invent. But I wasn't worried about jail. I was worried about accidents. Prisoners had fatal allergic reactions to jail food, slipped in showers, got into fights with violent cellmates. Hayes had creative ways of solving problems. That's when Deputy Martinez walked in. "Elena." He looked tired, older, like he'd aged years in the past week. "We need to talk." He led me to an interview room, closed the door, and sat down across the metal table with his head in his hands. "Victoria Steinberg wasn't lying," he said finally. "They own my mortgage, my daughter's student loans, my wife's medical bills. Everything. My heart sank. So you're here to... I'm here to tell you that sometimes good men make bad choices because they're scared. He looked up, eyes red with exhaustion and shame. But sometimes they get a chance to make things right. He pulled out a cell phone, hit record, and started talking. My name is Deputy Sheriff Eduardo Martinez. For the record, I was coerced into providing false information and obstruct justice by Commissioner Robert Hayes and his associates. The following statement details criminal conspiracy, environmental fraud, and intimidation of witnesses. For 20 minutes, Martinez laid out everything: Hayes' scheme, the bought officials, the threatened families, the murdered evidence. Every crime, every bribe, every life destroyed in the name of profit. Why now? I asked when he finished. Because Kim Patel didn't deserve to die. Because 12 families didn't deserve to lose their homes. And because my daughter asked me what kind of man I wanted to be when she grows up. He handed me the phone. Sarah Chen is waiting for this recording. Hayes doesn't know I'm here. He thinks I'm processing your arrest paperwork. What happens to you? Martinez smiled for the first time in days. Probably prison. Definitely bankruptcy. But Elena, I'll sleep better than I have in months. The jail's back exit led to the employee parking lot. Martinez's patrol car sat empty, keys on the seat, GPS disabled. You've got maybe 2 hours before Hayes figures out what happened, he said. Get that recording to Chen, get your evidence public, and get somewhere safe. I was halfway to my truck when the explosion lit up the night sky behind me. The county jail's west wing, where I'd been held, erupted in flames and debris. Electrical fire, the news would say later. Terrible accident. If Martinez hadn't risked everything to get me out, I'd be dead. But Bear's boat was still at the marina. The camera was still hidden. And somewhere in the darkness, federal investigator Sarah Chen was coordinating the biggest environmental crime bust in county history. Hayes thought he'd won, thought he'd eliminated the last witness to his crimes. He'd forgotten about the evidence swimming in Clearwater Lake, waiting to surface. And tomorrow, the whole county would learn what Commissioner Robert Hayes had been hiding beneath those peaceful waters. Justice, it turned out, was about to get very wet. The annual Clearwater Lake swimming competition drew 300 participants and twice that many spectators. Perfect weather, perfect turnout, and perfect timing for what Sarah Chen called the most public environmental demonstration in federal law enforcement history. Commissioner Hayes stood at the starting line in his best political smile, shaking hands and kissing babies like he wasn't facing federal indictment in 48 hours. The man had balls, I'll give him that. Even knowing his world was crumbling, he played his role perfectly. Ladies and gentlemen, he announced through the loudspeaker, welcome to Clearwater Lake's tradition of family fun and community spirit. I stood in the crowd, heart hammering, watching Hayes bask in applause from people whose lives he'd destroyed. Bear flanked my left side, the underwater camera hidden in his jacket. Sarah Chen moved through the crowd like a predator, federal marshals disguised as swim coaches and hot dog vendors. But the real show was about to happen in the water. Before our swimmers take their mark, I called out, loud enough for everyone to hear. How about we test the water they're about to swim in? Hayes' smile faltered. Excuse me? I stepped forward, pulling my grandfather's pH meter from my pocket. Elena Vasquez, certified water quality specialist. Mind if I check the safety of our beautiful lake? Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Parents pulled their children closer. Swimmers looked uncertain. Hayes recovered quickly. Of course, I'm sure our pristine lake will pass any test with flying colors. Wonderful. I waded into the lake at the starting area, the crowd following along the shoreline. Let's start here, near the public beach. The pH meter read 7.1, normal, healthy water. I held it up for everyone to see. Perfect swimming conditions, Hayes announced, relief flooding his voice. Absolutely. I waded deeper, moving south along the shoreline. Now let's check the water near the industrial complex. That's when Hayes realized what was happening. His face went white as I approached the hidden discharge pipes. Behind him, Victoria and Veronica Steinberg pushed through the crowd, phones pressed to their ears. The pH reading at the first pipe dropped to 6.2, concerned murmurs from the crowd. Still within acceptable range, Hayes stammered, but maybe we should. I moved to the main discharge pipe, the one Bear and I had documented underwater. The crowd followed like I was leading some kind of environmental parade. "And here," I said, holding the pH meter at the source of Hayes's poison, "we have readings of 4.1, acidic enough to burn skin and kill fish." The crowd erupted. Parents shouted questions. Swimmers demanded answers. Hayes tried to grab the microphone from the announcer's table, but Sarah Chen stepped into his path. "Federal agents, everyone stay calm." But the real proof came when Bear activated his remote device. The underwater camera we'd planted at the main discharge pipe began releasing colored dye into the water, bright yellow tracer that showed exactly where Hayes's industrial poison was flowing. Within minutes, a yellow plume spread across the southern end of the lake, like a neon sign pointing to corruption. The crowd watched in stunned silence as decades of illegal dumping became visible to everyone. "Commissioner Hayes," Sarah Chen announced, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, environmental terrorism, and federal racketeering charges." Hayes tried to run, made it maybe 20 yards before federal marshals tackled him into the lake he'd spent 5 years poisoning. The irony was beautiful. Victoria and Veronica Steinberg lasted longer. They had a boat waiting, but Coast Guard interceptors had been monitoring radio traffic all morning. They were in federal custody before they cleared the harbor. The swimming competition was canceled, obviously, but nobody went home angry. They stayed to watch the EPA's emergency response team begin the largest environmental cleanup in county history. That evening, I sat on what was left of my grandfather's dock, watching federal investigators catalog evidence of Hayes's crimes. The old pH meter rested in my lap, its job finally done. Bear joined me with 2 beers and a satisfaction deeper than Clearwater Lake. "Think the water will ever be clean again?" he asked. "It'll take years, maybe decades." I looked out at the lake, imagining it without the yellow stain of corruption. "But yeah, it'll heal." "What about you? EPA offered you a job, right?" "Regional Environmental Crimes Investigator, based out of the state capitol." I smiled. "Turns out there's a whole network of Hayes-type operations across 3 states. Sarah thinks I'd be good at finding them." Grandfather would be proud. Yeah, he would. 3 months later, my new dock was smaller than the old one, but it was mine, built with clean money on clean water over the grave of Commissioner Hayes' criminal empire. The lake still showed scars from decades of illegal dumping, but fish were returning, kids were swimming again, and 12 families had gotten their properties back through federal asset forfeiture. Hayes got 15 years in federal prison. The Steinberg sisters got 8 years each. Deputy Martinez got probation and a job with the County Environmental Compliance Office. And me, I kept my grandfather's pH meter as a reminder that sometimes the simplest tools are the most powerful weapons against corruption. The water was finally clean, and justice, as it turned out, really did flow downstream. Some fights are worth risking everything for. This was one of them.